Now, joining us to talk more about this is Rami El-Kayoubi, who is joining us from Moscow, who is a lecturer at the Higher School of Economics. Thank you very much for being here with us. So already the EU has drastically reduced its reliance on Russian pipeline gas. So how impactful do you reckon that this will be on Russian LNG imports?
I don't think that it will have any important impact because actually Russia during the last few years managed to diversify its energy exports, and now China and India and Turkey are the main exporters or rather importers of Russian energy resources. And at this point, well, there are still few European countries that buy Russian gas and oil, but they are no longer influential. So even if Russian energy supplies to Europe are totally halted, it will not be crucial for Russian economy.
And how effective do you think the restrictions on cryptocurrency platforms might be, given the adaptive nature of financial evasion tactics?
Well, actually, Europe is trying to stop Russia's war in Ukraine by imposing one package of sanctions after another. But if we read the history, we will explore that sanctions did not influence or even all small countries such as North Korea, Iran, Syria under Assad, or Libya under Gaddafi. So shall it influence such superpower as Russia? No, obviously not. So at this point, European sanctions have impact on Russian economy, but they are not crucial.
And this is the 19th package of restrictions and sanctions. Do you think we might ever get to a limit for President Putin?
Well, actually, 19th or 20th or 30th package of sanctions, as I mentioned, will have some impact on Russian economy, but it will not change Russian strategy in total, as actually Russia managed to find alternatives to partners such as China, India, Arab states, and at this point, European sanctions have no longer a crucial impact on Russian economy.
And are there financial loopholes when it comes to enforcing, the member states enforcing these measures?
Actually, it's difficult to evaluate these sanctions now, as everything will depend on how they will be applied. For example, the European Union imposed sanctions on Russian oil, but Russia managed to redirect its export to China and India developed few oil plants, and now actually few oil products go to Europe as if they were Indian, but in fact they are produced out of Russian oil. So really, this is a question that many questions will depend really on details.
Yeah, and what about these frozen Russian assets? Do you think the EU is going to do anything about the money they have in their banks put there by Russian oligarchs?
Well, actually, it's possible. Actually, the Western countries have already freezed Russian actives for more than $300 billion, and it didn't have impact. Now they might impose some sanctions on Russian oligarchs, as you mentioned, but actually this will have a negative influence on the image of Europe as a region which guarantees investments. But in case if the EU implies some sanctions against individuals, that will mean that there are no guarantees.
Yeah, I mean, Germany has expressed legal reservations. Do you think that the EU will come to some kind of agreement?
Well, what I mentioned was the European Union invents different sanctions and then itself invents different ways to get around them. As the last few years have proved that when you speak about such superpower as Russia, you cannot erase it from economic and geopolitical map. So, and as long as the European Union develops sanctions, Russia develops ways to get around them, such as the Grey Fleet, which is specialized in such oil which is like Iranian, Venezuelan, Russian, which is under sanctions. Where now there is an option of parallel import in Russia, so and all Western commodities such as iPhones are presented in Russia via parallel import without authorized agents. These sanctions will not succeed anyway.
So do we think, like, whatever happens, when it comes to financial measures, when it comes to sanctions on Russia, Putin is not going to budge?
Well, as I mentioned, Putin now has very concrete goals in Ukraine, which is the first of which is to take Donetsk region under total control. Actually, Putin has military reserves. As yesterday, Putin mentioned that there are 700,000 Russian soldiers on the front line. So at this point, Russia is quite stable, and some new sanctions from the West will not have a crucial influence on Russia.
When it comes to the United States, of course, big players in this, where do you think Trump comes down on sanctions? He keeps threatening more financial sanctions on Russia, but then delays them and hasn't got around to doing it yet.
Well, actually, Trump's policy is different. Trump uses the policy of carrot and stick with Russia and Ukraine, and he feels that when Russia is not willing for peace process, he threatens Russia with sanctions. So when Ukraine is not interested in the dialogue, he puts pressure on Ukraine. So sometimes he deals with Russian-Ukrainian crisis as if it was a real estate deal in New York, but it's much more complicated